Stage 22, participles from deponent verbs. You're like, what? Okay, so first of all, you've met present active participles and perfect passive participles, and you know I'm going to ask you in class, from now until forever, what is a participle? A participle is an adjective that comes from a verb. Present active participles are happening now. They're translated into English as verbing. Perfect passive participles have happened in the past, and someone has been acted upon, or someone's passively receiving the action. They're translated as having been verbed. Okay, so now we have this new participle. Here's two Latin sentences that will demonstrate it. Senex deam precatus amuletum, misspelled a word there, in fontem injecit et exiit. Okay, precatus is a participle. If you look on your Stage 22 vocabulary list, you're going to notice that precatus is there, and the translation of it is having prayed to. If you didn't know any better, you'd look at it and you would say, you know, I think that might be a perfect passive participle because there's no ns or no nt, but that would be translated as having been prayed to, and yet your book is telling you it's translated as having prayed to. Let's look at this next one. Fur termas ingressus ad fontem sacrum festinavit. The thief, having entered the baths, hurried to the sacred fountain. Again, ingressus is a vocab word from Stage 22, and you might think it's a perfect passive participle, but it's not translated as having been entered. It's translated as having entered. Ooh, so what are these? Well, these participles are called participles from deponent verbs. Let's talk about that word deponent for a minute. It comes from a Latin word deponere. De plus pono ponere. Pono ponere means to put or place, and de means down. This is a special subsect of verbs, a little subsection here, where for whatever reason, and I don't know the reason why, they have literally put aside or put down their active forms. Their active forms don't exist in Latin. Only their passive forms exist in Latin. But here's the super annoying but very important thing about deponent verbs. Although they look passive, you have to translate them actively. Now the good news, the super good news, is that this is a specific subsection of Latin verbs, and so therefore we have a specified list of deponent verbs. And here are the participles from those deponent verbs that you will run into more often than not, both this year, next year, and in Latin 4/AP, whichever one you decide to take. Our memory trick is replicas, and that'll help us remember. Go ahead and pause now and write all this down. Okay, now that you've written it all down, you probably noticed some patterns. First of all, there are four that have gressus in them: regressus, egressus, progressus, ingressus. Gressus has to do with walking, essentially, or moving from one place to another. So that might make it easier to remember that regressus is having returned or having gone back. Egressus is having gone out. A there is short for X. Progressus, having advanced or having gone forward. Pro, means in front of. And then we have ingressus, which is pretty self-explanatory, having entered, like having gone in a place. So that's one way to remember those four. Passus, having suffered. We get words like passive and passionate from that. Precatus, having prayed to. A precarious situation is one in which you need to do some praying on. Locutus, having spoken. One way to remember that is circumlocute, is to talk around, to speak around an issue and not answer directly. Or if someone is loquacious, they're very talkative. Conspicatus, having caught sight of. You can think of an English derivative, conspicuous, which should help make it easier. Adeptus, having received. If you're adept at something, it means you're skilled. You've received the tools that you need in order to do that task successfully. And then secutus, having followed. We get words like consecutive and really secondary, etc. All right, so that's the list of verbs that you have to know, list of deponent participles. And the trick is, notice how they're all translated as having verbed, not having been verbed, even though they kind of look like perfect passive participles, but rather having verbed. Let's take a look at a few examples from Stage 22. Wilbia, multa verba locuta, tandem tacuit. Now remember that participles are adjectives, so they always agree with a noun in case, number, gender. Wilbia, having spoken many words, at last got quiet. Modestus tabernam ingressus Wilbiam conspexit. Modestus, having entered the bar, tavern, whatever you want to say, caught sight of Wilbia. Mercatores pecuniam adepti ad naves contenderunt. Adepti here is plural, masculine, and it's agreeing with mercatores, plural, masculine, nominative. The merchants, having obtained money, hurried to the ships. And then finally, ancillae annulum conspicatae eum inspicere volebant. So conspicatae is our participle from the deponent verb, and conspicatus means having caught sight of. Use the looky-likey rule here, agrees with ancillae, the slave girls. Having caught sight of the ring, wanted to inspect it. So you just have to memorize the list, replicas, and know that they're all translated as having verbed. And this is like a little special subsection of verbs. But the thing is, they're used all the time in real Latin, so you really, really have to know this list. That's the key. Replicas. See you later, Soylent Green.